What's going on, everybody? Looper Norris back with another episode, another album reaction. I go over the most recent albums of 2023, 2024. Today, I got a new album to go over. Before we move forward with this episode, the new song Waldo, already out, all platforms. Listen to that song if you haven't already. It's the newest song that I have out. The next song that I'll drop December 14th. This song is called Cafe Fiend. The artwork cover should be out. This song's dropping for December 14th. I'm going to continue to release songs starting January 4th, the 14th, the 24th. Every single month, I'm going to drop a single up until a new project, Lights, Camera, Actors. That album is set for next year, June 4th. I'm going to drop 3 singles every single month up until June 4th. And then after maybe like a month, I'd say, then I'm going to continue dropping singles throughout the year. Yeah, so subscribe to the channel. If you like what you're hearing, definitely subscribe to the channel. Like the video. Today's episode, we're going to do the sort of new album by Danny Brown, Quaranta. So this is an album he released last year, 2023. This is a little bit of an older project. Just like every episode, 4 songs, a snippet of it. Then I'm going to start talking about the album, rating at the end of the video. We're going to get right into this one. Once again, Danny Brown, Quaranta. The first track I'll play, this song's called Tantor. This one's called Down With It.
The path that I chosen left a nigga broken. Can't stay focused. Hard for me to think. Trying to kill my pain, so I drink.
This one's called Shakedown.
Used to catch the bus to 12, ass crack with the pack. Had me sitting to the side, couldn't even lean back. Now the only
the last track I'll play, this one's called Ain't My Concern.
the way to get it, tell me where to sign up. Ain't no shortcuts or process you can trust. I done came up, nigga, on the grip.
Danny Brown, 2023 album, Quaranta. This is an album he released in 2023 around November. Danny Brown from Detroit, Michigan. He's one of those rappers that always had like a different style. I always looked at him as like the rapper version of JPEG Mafia, even though JPEG Mafia is a rapper himself. And it's funny because they're like homies too, right? But I always looked at Danny Brown as like the rapper version of JPEG Mafia. And JPEG Mafia, like, he's mostly a producer. That's the analogy that I'm going with. Danny Brown, man, he's one of those rappers that I like grew up listening to. He started his career out like really late. He's been doing the rap thing for a long time, since he was like in his early 20s, but it wasn't until he turned 30 that's when people started to recognize his vision, his music, his art. That's when he really started to pop off, work with some big names in the game. He has that distinctive style where he switches his voice pitch from like up to down. He'll rap a whole verse with like a deeper pitch, and then on another track he'll raise up the pitch. He'll rap a whole track out with the high pitch, and he has really good control. That's one thing that he's famous for, and his distinctive style too. Like, even the way he dresses, he doesn't really look like a rapper. He looks more like a rock star, like punk rocker type of guy that doesn't even make rap music. Pretty sure he took a lot of influence from a lot of rock bands from back in the day. The reason why his style is the way it is, he really seems like the type of artist that's into a lot of different genres outside of rap music and takes his influence from like a number of different artists. And very funny too. He's always been that type of rapper that can come up with really strong punchlines and come up with music that really makes you think. He can also be like really funny, and he displays that a lot on his XXX mixtape way back in like 2015, I think. I could be wrong about that, but he had this mixtape called XXX, and all over that mixtape he's just like being that funny, kind of a weird guy, but like weird in like a funny way. Danny Brown, he's always been that type of rapper that's so different. It's hard to compare his music and even his whole look, his whole image to other rappers. He's very, very distinctive. He stands out amongst a crowd. He really shows that through the music on this album. The whole like experimental style that you even hear him use with JPEG Mafia, a frequent collaborator, probably one of his friends, and they collaborate often with each other. Danny Brown's style sort of reminds me of JPEG Mafia style, making their music in a very experimental way, being very unconventional when it comes to like their ideas of what type of music they want to put together, even like the beat making style. Danny Brown isn't a beat maker like JPEG Mafia, right? They're like the perfect duo to work with each other because both of their minds are similar in a way where they both think in an experimental way, just not following the typical rules that you have to follow when you're writing a rap verse. Danny Brown doesn't really like think about that. He's more about making the song as good as possible with his own uniqueness so that the songs stand out. They reflect the type of person he is instead of just making a song that's gonna like blow up. He cares more about the music over the fame and money. That's one thing that you can definitely say about Danny Brown. That reminds me of JPEG Mafia a whole lot. Just like I was saying about Danny Brown's distinctive style, he really shows that on this album. The beat is experimental, and it really sounds like JPEG Mafia might have produced the whole album. Maybe he did like 3 or 4 songs, because a lot of the beats on here sound super experimental. They definitely sound like beats that JPEG Mafia makes for his own music, so I wouldn't be surprised. They're also homies. They've collaborated before. It's perfect for what Danny Brown does. Just like I was saying earlier, Danny Brown is basically boom bap style rapping, using old school style formulas to like put together his punchlines, but then he has that like pitch control with his vocals, making it even more distinctive compared to like what everyone else is doing. His delivery can be super like weird too, like the way he'll deliver his lines. You can't really compare Danny Brown to another rapper. Like, if you really try to think about it, like, who does Danny Brown sound like? You know what I mean? He's the one rapper in the world where you can't really compare him to anybody else. So he shows that off a lot on this album. Almost every track from 1 to 11, just trying his best to make every song as different as possible compared to like what you've heard before. Not caring at all about the radio scene, trying to like make a hit out of the songs. Like, none of the songs are hits 100%. All these songs are definitely meant for you to sit down, really like pay attention to, put some headphones on and be by yourself and just listen to like what Danny Brown's saying. It's definitely that style of music. Very experimental style too. Like, every song sounds completely different from the next song, but Danny Brown, very skilled rapper. He's been doing it for a long time. He didn't get famous until he turned 30. So like, that's another maybe decade and a little bit more of doing this professionally. He just wasn't famous yet. And then once he hit 30 years old, that's when he really started to take off. This album is just, it's different from like any other album I've heard from Danny Brown. Everything is just super experimental, but like good experimental. Even though there are a few songs on here that are a little difficult to listen to, might scare off most people away. The only thing about experimental music, there's a lot more good from it than bad, in my personal opinion. The only thing bad about it, trying to get everyone to listen to it, because the thing about experimental, some people don't get it. Some people are looking for a song to like dance to and party to. If the rhythm isn't upbeat enough for them to like party to it, like, it might scare a lot of people away. That's probably what JPEG Mafia meant and Danny Brown when they did the collaboration album Scaring the Hoes, being super experimental that it scares people away. They're moving away from the party scene and the club scene and trying to just make generational music for the culture, in a sense, right? That's what you get with this album. But the only problem with that, a lot of people might look at it as low energy and a little more on the boring side, and that's what it does. I mean, Danny Brown, he's an older rapper. He's closer to his 50s. He might actually be 50 now, and it really shows through the music here. You can definitely tell through his older music that he's matured over time. He wasn't really immature. He was definitely more on the mature side, and you can tell through the music. You can tell that he's been working on his craft. He got it to a certain point where like he is now a professional and expert at what he does. So you wouldn't really call that immature. He matured over the years. I'm pretty sure he did a lot of drugs and back in the day, and he always tried to like get off the drugs and get off the drinking. He was also an alcoholic, I'm pretty sure. Now he's completely sober. Could be wrong about that. He's too hyper focused on trying to make boom bap real hip hop. So that's one thing. It's experimental. There isn't a lot of big names in the features. I mean, there's Mike, but Mike isn't like the most famous rapper. He's like sort of famous when it comes to like hip hop heads. I mean, if you know who Danny Brown is, you might know who Mike is. And the other two features, I've never seen these names before. Yeah, and there's only 3 features on the album. And the beats are very experimental. That's another thing. They're not the type of beats that you would hear from like Travis Scott or like Lil Baby. They're more on the experimental side that you have to like really like take in and pay attention to really understand. Probably the only negative thing I can say about the album, and I mean it's an important thing, like you can't really be too focused on the seriousness about the album, trying to make something like groundbreaking and trying to make like a classic. There's got to be a little bit of entertainment so that you get like the younger generation. It's more listens at the end of the day, more money in the artist's pocket. Once again, Danny Brown is an older rapper, closer to his 50s. I don't think he cares about that. He cares more about making good music that everyone's gonna remember forever, trying to take it to that like next level. Even though he is in his 50s and he's been doing it for such a long time, he's probably still trying to like level up and still try to become a even better artist than he is. The most generic sounding track, I'd say, is Shakedown. It's the one song that I can see getting played on the radio. It's the one song I can see a lot of people enjoying out of all the tracks, if you're not like the biggest experimental fan. But outside of that song, everything else is like super experimental, man. It feels like I'm listening to an Animal Collective album or something, man. Every beat is super strange on this one. So there's 11 tracks on here. Usually I would say that it's too low of a number. More tracks would have made the album a lot better. Sometimes I complain about the album being too long. For this album, I think 11 songs is perfect. It's like the type of artist Danny Brown is, the type of album that he was going for with this project. Adding more songs maybe would ruin the album. Everything is very much connected with each other in terms of like the track listing and the name of the album, the whole concept of what the album is supposed to mean. Danny Brown did excellent job at executing that with each track and actually making an album. This album is definitely not meant for people who want to go to the club. This isn't the type of music that you want to play if you want to like party and like have fun and stuff. It's definitely not that type of album. It's definitely the type of album for those people who are passionate about music. Just like I was saying earlier in the video, the only bad stuff I have to say, how boring it can get because of how focused Danny Brown is on trying to create something fresh for his fan base, music lovers in general, you know, the songwriting, what the album is supposed to mean. Everything is very dry and boring, but interesting if you're into music in that way. After saying all of that, in terms of a rating, I'm giving this album a 7.6 out of 10. It's good music. If you have the right ear for it and you understand the music and what Danny Brown is trying to say, he does give off a lot of gems through his lyrics when you really pay attention to it. This guy's a lyricist, man. Outside of his like weird style, the way he dresses and like his whole persona just being super like odd, being like a very odd person. Outside of all of that, the man can really rap. Definitely above a 7.5, but I kept it at 7.6 just because it gets a little too experimental. There's no bangers on here. The features, like outside of Mike, there isn't anybody who like really goes off and keeps up with Danny Brown's lyrical ability. He should have got stronger lyricists to feature on the album. I would have gave it a better rating. Maybe like 1 or 2 bangers in between the experimental tracks just to make it more of an all-around album. Just overall, even though the album is super experimental and that's the type of like style that I'm into, it's still not as good as other projects I've heard from Danny Brown. He's definitely had better albums than this that are like far more experimental and they're just like a better album. Danny Brown he's capable of a lot more than this. So 7.6 out of 10. Another album review, album reaction, man. I appreciate you guys watching today's episode. Please like, subscribe to the channel, comment, let me know if you guys give it a different rating. I got a lot more of these episodes to come in the future, 2 of these a week. Check out the track Waldo, out on all platforms, available on my YouTube page also. December 14th, I got Cafe Fiend. That's the next track that I'll be dropping. That will be it for the year. And then starting January 4th, 3 tracks every month. I really appreciate you guys watching. The views, really appreciate it, man. And if you like what you're hearing, subscribe to the channel, man. That's all I got for today's episode. I'm out.